Just competing. I think that's the biggest thing. That's like the biggest similarity. Trying to stay in shape for the most part. So trying to get as much as you can out of playing each other and just working like on our stuff. Obviously you can't really scout for anybody yet. So we're just trying to get better with what we're good at, and then when we know who we play, we'll kind of flip gears.
You guys are so highly competitive, and we see it every night out on the floor. But what you're just talking about there, it seems like you guys have a really nice feel of like that internal competitiveness that you need to have. That it's calibrated really well for your group. What leads to that? Who's kind of like some ringleaders for keeping the competitiveness high, but in the right spot?
I don't want to say myself, but I think we just have like two obviously is ultra competitive. We just have like a really competitive group, so it's like one of those things where I don't think people on our team really know how to like not do it. So it's more like sometimes like toning it down so we don't like hurt each other during some of these practices. But I think everybody knows what we need to do in order to get better and like kind of take that next step. So that's kind of how we've been approaching practice. So I think everybody's had that same mentality. We had a players meeting that we do every like 10, 15 games before we started, and just like what we want to get done and what we want to get accomplished for it.
Doug, now that you're a year removed from your first postseason, like reflecting on that, what did you learn about sort of microscope you're under in a series and the differences between the regular season and the playoffs?
Probably just that, like there's a lot more eyes watching, there's a lot more opinions and a lot more outside noise that can distract you from a goal. So just taking that into account and trying to get better and win these days while we're not playing. I think that's the biggest thing for me and just the rest of the team too.
And you feel like you have a good grasp on sort of the emotional strain between games and the way you have to kind of reset.
Yeah, you can't get too high, you can't get too low. I think I did a pretty good job of that last year, just kind of staying even keeled. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs during the games, and at the end of the day, I think for us, it's just no matter what's going on, it's whoever can respond the best for these games, and that's something that we're going to try and do.
Mark has such a experimentation mindset, sort of always been that way. I'm wondering if you can reflect on last year's playoffs and maybe how some of what he's done over the years with lineups or just different things. You felt like last year in the playoffs may have benefited you guys and maybe could be similar this year.
It's two totally different things going on, so I think his coaching style fits for us to be successful in the postseason, but trying to compare last year's team to now, it's not even like really it's really not like a lot to really like compare, I feel like. And I feel like him as a coach too, he's grown from a year or two, so to even kind of say he's doing like the same stuff would kind of, I think, go against him as being a good coach, just kind of how he's evolved.
I was thinking more in terms of, he says that, doing a lot of the stuff that he does sets you guys up to be able to adapt, when it's time to go small or when it's time to change lineups and stuff like that. So you're kind of ready for anything. Did you feel that last year in the playoffs?
Yeah, we definitely had some, we had so many lineup changes last year. Just, you never know if people are going to get hurt, who's going to be healthy, who gets thrown out of a game. There's so many variables, and we just kind of had that ready. And that's something that we did, again, this year. You guys have seen all the lineups, and obviously, we've added more guys, so we've had a ton more lineups. So I think it definitely prepares us for when we're out here, and you never know what can happen.
Did you feel that ease last year in the playoffs when you guys did maybe have to adjust?
Yeah, for sure. I was out there playing with guys that it wasn't like a shock that I was playing with, if that makes sense. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Other than the win total 68, what's the difference between this year's team and last year's team?
More experience. We have different players on our team too.
Or we've gotten better. Maybe that's better.
Yeah, I think we just been through a lot more. That's just kind of how like time works, and obviously being the 1 seed 2 years in a row, like you go through a lot of different ups and downs during the season. I think one that always sticks out is just like us playing in the Cup as far as we did, and then going on we did like a road trip where we played Miami and Orlando back to back and changing time zones, like just being able to grow through that, and we won 15 in a row right after that. So it's like just like learning how to evolve with the season and kind of make no excuses and just get better through each game. I think we've done a really good job of that this year, and that's where we've grown.
You guys play Sunday at noon on ABC in front of a national audience. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It is cool.
Been a night game, and
yeah.
The channel too.
Yeah, it'll be cool. I don't really have more else than that. Yeah, it's gonna be cool though. I think it's always dope to play on Sunday. I'm pretty sure it's Easter if I'm not mistaken. So that'll be pretty special too.
Obviously, I don't know that you've thought about this, but the metrics obviously say that you guys should be a championship team or are capable of being a championship team. But there's no team this young that's ever done it, so you would be an outlier if you were to do it. Is that something you put in perspective at all? And regardless, like, what makes you think that you guys can be the team to do it?
I think we have the talent enough to do that. It's also something that I'm not gonna lie and like say like we don't think about it, but it's something that we kind of put on the back burner. When you start looking too far ahead, you miss what's in front of you. So I think we've done a really good job of just kind of like taking each day at a time and not trying to bite off more than you can chew. Obviously, all those are super cool accomplishments, and we kind of know like the rare era that we're in, but at the same time, the teams we're playing don't really care. And, you know, it's something that we've definitely pushed off and something where we're trying to like get better, win the days in between, and obviously day by day win in advance kind of thing.
And I know you talked some about this on Tommy Alta's pod, but you've kind of popularized this whole watch the games thing that's become like a thing for you. Like, how crazy is it though? There's team won 68 games, and you're almost like having to convince people to still tune in.
I wouldn't say it's using as like convincing, but I mean that's the nature of anything. Some things that I find important, some people may not find important, and that's just life. So, but it is interesting that it caught traction the way that it did. Because when I said it at first, I wasn't really like doing too much with it, but it's more just like a prompt to like actually like sit down and like obviously there's a lot of like betting and stuff that goes in like the NBA. So like people are more looking at a box score than like actually like watching the basketball, and like this is like some of the most talented era of basketball that we've seen. Like you look at the MVP race, you look at all the people that can make the all NBA teams. It's like I think people miss that in regards to kind of just like betting and just other stuff. So I think that's what I mean by it. It's like just kind of like appreciate what's there before we have to like look back down the road and it's like, oh, he did have a really good season, or like, you know what I mean? Like you miss a ton of stuff in between that. Is that mine? Hold it up. Oh.
Since Lou's
Hang it up.
Since Lou's face is staring back at us, you wanna pub your guy?
I mean, you guys see what it says. I think it says decoy, right? Yeah, it does. That's all. Watch the games. I'm out. Thank you guys.
Special or extraordinary for us, I think it's doing the things that we're great at, you know. We know that the playoffs are more intense. Like obviously we'll have great ball pressure and great intensity defensively, but you know, being focused on the details of coverages, finishing possessions with rebounds, limiting free throws, like keeping teams out of transition. Those are things, and then obviously offensive execution, getting great shots, being aggressive, touching the paint. You know, all the things that you know good teams do, and things that we've shown we can do over the course of the season. But really, just you know, fine tuning all like the execution and discipline of all of it.
Something that you guys have done offensively even better and better over the course of the year. It seems like getting into actions quicker, you know, recognizing defense, getting into it immediately. As teams try to bog down and slow down the game defensively, just how critical is that going to be for you all to just be fast and into stuff early?
Yeah, playoffs is more of a chess match, right? There's different coverages teams throw at you, different nights with different matchups. Luckily, we've gotten a good dose of everything throughout the season. So we've seen a lot of it. People will probably try stuff we haven't seen yet just to see if, you know, that stuff will work just because we have been so good on that side of the ball. But, you know, a lot of it's just trusting the stuff that we have, you know, being really, really good at the stuff that we do well. I think will put us in a great position.
Alex, what feels different about entering the playoffs with this team than teams you play with in the past?
I got 7 days rest before I play in the playoff game. That's nice instead of 3 months or a day and a half. I don't know. You know, this team is unique just because you know we have a good concentration and competitiveness when we get on the court, but like we're also very true to ourselves and like to have a good time and you know stay lighthearted away from the game, which I think is important just throughout the playoffs with so much emotional and mental strain that you go through game in, game out. Just being able to kind of disconnect on those days in between to kind of reset and get back to 0-0 mindset going into the next game. I think that's that's the thing that this team does well.
You mentioned that game-to-game emotional strength. Obviously, these guys, if they were around last year, they were in the playoffs, but they only played 10 games. You played way more than that. How are you trying to impress upon them what it takes to kind of reset and get through that emotional strength?
Yeah, I mean, I got good experience with it just from both sides. I mean, the series I had with Chicago against the Bucks, we lost game 1 and then won game 2. Had a chance to win both of them, and almost got too high coming back, and then lost 2 games at home. So, and then reverse of that with the Lakers, we lost game 1 against Portland in the first round, and I'm pretty sure we lost either game 1 or 2 against Houston in the second round, which is essentially the home court advantage games. It was different in the bubble, but a lot of that is just making sure that you understand every game is worth 1. There's no game that's worth 2 wins in a series, 2 losses, and they've done a good job of that. I don't think anybody in here is going to be surprised when the adversity hits. Like, that's what postseason's about, is playing through adversity and being ready for it when it comes. And I think we've done a good job of that through the season, and looking forward to doing it again, in the postseason.
At least related to that, history tells us that older, more experienced teams usually fare better in the playoffs. Obviously, this is a young team just making its second go in the playoffs. Like, what about this team can be an outlier in that sense that you guys can overcome maybe the lack of experience?
I don't think we're the same normal young team, and that might come off as a little arrogant, but I think the mindset of this team throughout the whole season has been take whatever challenge comes in front of you head on, and our next challenge is to go win 4 games in a series and try to get to the next round. And if we do that, we'll have a chance to do it again and do it again. So for us, the youth thing's a nice headline to throw out there, and people want to talk about it. But at the end of the day, you got to throw the ball up and play the games. And I think throughout the course of the season, we've done a good job of growing up in the game of basketball. And like we talked about earlier with Nick, just fine-tuning different executions against a lot of different looks defensively, working through a double big lineup, a no big lineup through the year, playing 1 big, playing 5 guys under 6'6". Like we've been able to kind of, like I said, through the ups and downs of the season, be able to figure out a lot of stuff. And one thing that I know about this team is they're competitive and they have a lot of heart and they want to win. And you can't really measure that.
Is that something you thought about at all, or in terms of the fact that all the metrics say you're a championship level team, but doing it, actually pulling it off, would mean that you're an outlier?
No. Like I said, you got to throw the ball up and play the games. So whatever the numbers look like, whatever the what ifs look like on paper, doesn't really matter. You got to go play the games, and at the end of the day, if you play good enough, you win. If not, you lose.
Since you've been reunited with Mark, now playing a full season under his coaching, what are the differences between the Blue Mark and now the Thunder head coach Mark?
Yeah, he still has some of the same mannerisms, beliefs. I think that's probably part of the reason why he stayed around with the organization. He's fine-tuned a lot of his basketball stuff, though. His knowledge of the game, I think, has grown a lot. I think his ability to adjust and really, just figure stuff out. Be a learner. Be a guy that's willing to take a back seat, put his ego aside to win games and to figure stuff out. He's been great leader, and that aspect hasn't changed since I've been with him the first time.
Back in your mind at that time with the Blue, do you feel like, I think this guy could be a head coach?
Honestly, no, and that's not a knock on him. That's just me not understanding what the NBA was like. Like I wasn't a selfish player. I don't think I've ever been, but I was very focused on getting out of the G League at that point.
How much does it help that your guys' defense kind of fuels your offense? I mean, in terms of when you guys are turning people over, getting steals, and producing points that way.
Yeah, to be a great team, you got to play defense. I don't think any team has had, if any, has had real postseason success without being good defensively. The whole mantra, defense win championships, is very true, in any sport, especially professionals. And a lot of that is, kind of what we hung our hat on through the year when ball doesn't go in some nights. And like I said, we had multitude of different lineups and offensive schemes to work through. So something we could always hang our hat on was playing hard defensively and getting after it and a lot of that, fuels getting out in transition, playing fast, which is how we want to play.
Where do you think your game is? You kind of had some injuries this year, in and out. It looked like your shooting's kind of picked up as the season went along. Where do you think you are headed into the playoffs?
I feel great. Feel confident. I got some really good action late in the season, just on a couple of the West Coast trips, a couple of the home games. Just get into that mindset of what the aggression level looks like, what the discipline looks like, the competitiveness every single possession. So I feel good, and I'm looking forward to getting out there with the guys.
How much? Let's got one more. How much does the Rolodex help you play these teams before? You take what you did in the regular season into the playoffs. How much can that help?
Yeah, you have to, just from a basic standpoint of understanding how they want to play and how they're going to guard you. Like I said earlier, teams are going to throw everything, scheme-wise, matchup-wise, cross-match, gimmicky defense, box and one. Like we'll probably see it all at some point during the postseason. So, I think for us, just building on the tools that we've kind of used throughout the season. I think we rely on that stuff. We'll be in good shape.
Alex, people talk about what changes in the playoffs. What changes the most with defense? What changes the least?
Physicality, obviously. If you've watched any of the playing games yesterday and then tonight coming up, you'll see just the level of physicality that you might get a couple more calls during the year, and during the postseason they let it ride a little more. Change the most, probably just the discipline of matchups and tendencies. You really focus on that in a series versus during the year. But it's not as much hit or miss. Everybody pretty much goes to their main stuff in the postseason.
The fact that that sounds very sort of cerebral. And you've obviously been around this game a long time and know a lot of those tendencies. Does that play into your hands and by extension this team's hands a little bit on defense?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that I've had to. It's something that I've had to sharpen to become a good defender and a good player in the league. Just learning the league, learning how people operate, learning where I can be advantageous defensively to try and take away stuff that people like to do. And postseason, like I said, that's what it's about. It's about tendencies. It's about habits. It's about knowing what the other team's going to do and then going out there and trying to stop it.
Hey, see, with Shea, back in November, he was reflecting on the Dallas series last year and just saying that he realized last summer that he needed to trust his teammates more, that he needed to put them in advantageous positions for life to be easier. A year later, how have you seen him maybe evolve that mindset as the years go on?
Yeah, I didn't get a good dose of that because I wasn't here yet, but that was something that I've heard him talk about, and I thought he's done a pretty good job of doing both this year. He's led the league in scoring, but we've had multiple guys on the team be able to eat off of his plate based on like I said, people doubling him, trapping him, cross matching, just different stuff. And I think his willingness to let other guys shine and be aggressive is, one, important for us to be a great team, but two, it just goes to show the kind of leader that he is, that he can shed ego and let the other guys get off too.
Thank you.
About depth, and you were talking about kind of the study that you all have done over the course of time. I just wonder if there's anything to the idea of like fatigue and depth in the playoff, and if there's some advantages that you all have noticed in performance among teams that have played more players in the playoffs.
I think it's team dependent. I don't think there's like a rule that if you play more, you play less. It's really what's best for you. I do think fatigue at this point in the season, there's kind of like the cumulative fatigue of the year. And then there's more acute fatigue, which is like game to game. And we're obviously pretty well positioned in terms of the cumulative fatigue. Like we were able to manage people's minutes. There's guys that miss time for other injuries that, allow them to maybe fill their tank at different times in the season. But with the acute fatigue, the schedule's out and we're playing every other day for the first part of the series. So, those are intense games. They're physically taxing. And sometimes, I think last year we had a 2-day break maybe between game 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, and this year we don't. So, certainly, again, for us, leaning into our depth, giving everybody a chance to go out there and show what they're capable of, still trying to do the best thing for the team, is top of mind for me, at least as we head into the first series. not knowing who we're playing.
Comparatively, do you feel like the schedule this year was more taxing or less taxing than last year?
In the regular season, um, I mean, every year you have a stretch of the schedule that's very, very tough. Um, Last year's January was probably the most intense month we've had. But this year, the coming out of the Cup and going across to Florida was a very, very tough, like acute schedule. The Cup game, in general, adding an 83rd game that's in Las Vegas for 6 days is tough. And then coming out of All-Star break, it was really tough. A lot of road games, condensed schedule. But I think our team did a great job of embracing that and using it to, develop our mettle and develop our resilience, which is important. It's part of what you need to do with an NBA schedule.
I asked Alex a little bit ago about, so much talk about what changes in the playoffs. And I asked him what changes on defense. He said a lot of it comes down to, understanding and knowledge. And I said, doesn't that play into your hands and maybe by extension the team's hands just because of how he seems to have an encyclopedic knowledge of things? But how do you sort of see him and then by extension the rest of the defense, just that aspect of playoff basketball, maybe how that could be a benefit to you guys?
I mean, Alex is, he's seen a lot of the pictures, and he's got great instincts at this point. I mean, that's his best quality. I mean, the stretch he had in the Phoenix game where he just, basically disrupted 5 straight possessions. That's instinctive. He's kind of able to sniff out what's going on, and then his instincts take over, and that's the point that you'd like everybody to get to. But conscious thought, kind of precedes that, and so he's seen a lot of the pictures. He's played the league. He's played against the main players. He's a technician, so having a guy like that really helps the team. I think it helps a guy like Cason Wallace who early in his career, he's playing I think last year he played almost all on instinct and competitive instinct. And so the exposure to a guy like Caruso for a guy like Cason is good exposure. And the exposure to a guy like Dort who, definitely learns the personnel, but is much more instinctive and much less, of a tactical study as Alex is. So everybody's different, but he has a great influence on the team.
Sounds like Alex too is very communicative with the guys. Have you seen that? And maybe is that even how communicative he is? Has that been even more than you thought it might be?
Well, I was around him. He was like that when he was 20. So I was like, well, it's definitely gonna be worse now.
Don't you mean better?
It's a ribbing him a little bit. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely communicative. He's got a great voice in the practices. So it's not just speeches. It's his voice fills a lot of gaps where, if we're slipping a little bit, he's like, let's lock in. Or, he talks through what we're doing defensively. He's talking, even when he's not on the court, he's talking through parts of the play. He's very, very vocal in huddles, but it's usually before I get in there. But he's got a great way about him. And the rest of the guys, create the space for that. We don't have, Dort says nothing. He leads by example. And so, he creates, Lou being the way he is, creates space for somebody like Alex who, the way he is, it's a great balance to have both of those guys that provide leadership in different ways.
If somebody had never seen you play this year, but saw you play last year, what would you tell them why you're better? Other than the 68 wins, obviously, but what's the difference between this year's team and last year's team?
I really hate comparing, but I think last year's team I thought was excellent with the tools that we had from a lineup standpoint, personnel standpoint. And I think this year's team, we have more tools. We maintained some of the things that we did really well last year, but we have the ability to move the scoreboard in different ways than we did last year. The double big is an example, with Hart and with Chet. I mean, when those guys are on the court together, we're an elite defensive rebounding team. Last year, we didn't have that lever to pull as potently. I also just think the individual players that are back from last year's team are all in a vacuum better, from the experiences last year, They're all young players, so their bodies are developing, their games are developing, and then the experience that we got last year in the postseason, they took that as information and motivation into the summer, and they came back in the fall more developed and evolved players. And so I think that's got a huge thing to do with it as well. But obviously the external additions have helped as well. I would be, I have to acknowledge that.
Oh, go ahead.
Mark, you talked about the benefits whenever you were in the G League of being able to come up with the NBA team during this time format. What's it like being on the other side of that, where you're bringing up the blue staff to help you in the playoffs?
It's just, first of all, they're very helpful this time of year. I mean, this sustained practice time, it's good to have extra people. We did some breakdowns today where it's nice to have like 8-9 coaches that can help on the court, whereas during the season we don't normally have that. So it's really helpful for us. And then in terms of, we're all in on trying to be the best team we can be in these playoffs, but we are also trying to develop a program. And these are guys that, do really, really good work, have bright futures, and could have bright futures here. And the exposure to the practices, the preparation, getting them involved in the preparation, a lot of them are doing like lead preparation. They're working on, future opponents potentially if we were to advance. They were working on, these opponents we're working on here. They're doing a lot of like lead stuff that gives them great exposure. And I think ultimately it's going to help them when they go back to, summer league, when they go back to the experience and the wisdom they gain from that makes them a more rounded coach and can help serve the players that are right in front of them when they get back into primary roles.
Sort of to piggyback on that, your players, obviously a lot of talk about young, but the growth they can see from game to game on an individual level and as a collective, like how do you try to promote that, and what does that look like from the inside?
I think the biggest thing, like Barry asked me yesterday about, I forget what his question was, but it's basically like,
Win now?
yeah, are you trying to win?
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
the best way to develop is to try to win. It's like, let's throw our best punch now, and then let's learn from the punch that we throw. And that's not only like year over year, that's like game over game. You can get better in the playoffs. You can get better in a series. You can get better against the opponent you're playing. And so we're going to play game one. When we wake up Sunday morning, the only thing we're going to be thinking about is trying to win game one. Players, coaches, everybody in the organization. But when game one is over, we have to take whatever information we have from that, learn from it, and apply it to game two. And when you repeat that process throughout the course of the season, and you're that invested, that only colors the development of the players. So it's not either or. I think development and winning often gets presented in a binary fashion, and I don't look at it like that. They're intertwined. We want to be fully competing and doing everything we can to win, and through that process, we then need to take what we learn from that and apply it to the development and the growth of players.
Injuries have obviously been like a concern this year in terms of like most teams want to get a set starting lineup, seems like traditionally, but you guys have been able to be really flexible this season. What's sort of the advantage of not being tied down to just one starting lineup?
I've always felt like the starting lineup is the beginning of your substitution pattern. Your starting lineup out of halftime is basically like the beginning of your substitution pattern in the second half. And so who you start, it's just the status of the starter, I think clouds what it really is. It's just like, no one questions when you make the first sub, at the 6-minute mark and who it is. But if you change the starting lineup, a big deal is made about that. And I think it's just like the reputation of what a starter is. And I think if we can redefine that a little bit and have a team that's able to adapt to that, then we kind of neutralize that. We condition our team and everybody else to the fact that it will be fluid and that it can be fluid and that we can go in a lot of different directions. And if other people choose not to be fluid, it can be a competitive advantage.
Personality-wise, does your team change? Do you guys are pretty loose in the season. Guys have fun. These are playoffs, more important games. Guys stay the same. You want them to stay the same. How you want them to handle that?
I want them to stay the exact same. I think they've got an unbelievable balance. To be your best, you have to compete with great urgency, but you also have to compete with great confidence. And our team gains confidence from the lightness and the joy that they bring each other. And if we were to like shift that right now, it would impact our collective confidence. That's part of a source of our confidence. And this team has shown for multiple years now that that lightness and looseness doesn't get in the way of competition. They're ready to go when the ball's in the air. And so I want them. Part of my job right now is to encourage them to be exactly who they are. We don't have to be anything more than who we are. We don't want to be anything less than who we are, but we just got to be who we are. And so I've got full confidence in that and want to encourage them to do that.
Mark, what does it mean to you and the team to get that noon ABC slot Sunday for Game 1?
I mean, it means that, we're going to wake up in the morning and not have shoot around and play at noon.
Thanks.